Happy New Year, everyone. 2022, we've got a great new episode of the Disciple Standard podcast. In this episode, I shoot rubber bands at Jake. And we take up a great topic about getting the church moving as we upgrade the operating system of the church. We're going to give you an update in the segment called The Tipping Point. And then, really, I think one of our best interviews to date with Jason Palm, who's just hit the 60 milestone. That's such a big deal. Looking forward to it. Let's get started. All right, so the topic of the day surrounds this idea. It's a new year, 2022. And Jake, I'm calling that the year of the disciple. We're multiply 222, and we have 222 disciple. Our key verse is 2 Timothy 2:2. So I just feel it. 2022 is going to be the year of the disciple. And, you know, this is great because this February 22nd in 2022 falls on a Tuesday. So we're going to make sure to celebrate that day especially. But yeah, I'm excited for the new year. How about you? Are you excited for the new year? What do you think 2022 holds for us here?
Oh, man. Well, even just hearing, prepping for the episode and stuff, hearing like all the growth that we've been having just in this past week. We're still in like the fresh parts of 2021 or 2022, in January. And, you know, if this first few weeks was a small sign of what's to come, then I'm ready for it.
Yeah,
it's great.
It's exciting to be a part of a multiplication movement of disciple makers, to see how God's changing lives. I think that's the real thing, how God's changing lives and having a front row seat to that. And I want to thank you for joining us. I hope that this year you'll continue to tune in and watch and listen to the podcast. We're glad to have you. 2022, the year of the disciple. Now, for the topic for the day, I kind of, as I think about the year of the disciple, I have a word picture or an image that comes into my mind. And I want to talk about this, the difference between potential and kinetic energy. So nothing like starting the new year by talking about physics. But here's the idea, Jake. I have in my hand here a rubber band. And when you pull the rubber band back and you're just holding it, and Jake's wincing because this is pointed now right at him. When you hold it, the rubber band is full of potential energy. But if I were to release it, okay, that was fun. That was fun. If I was to release it, all the potential energy, maybe I should demonstrate again. All the potential energy is changed and transferred into kinetic energy as the rubber band gets moving. So there we go. The difference between potential energy, when the rubber band's pulled back, it's filled with potential energy. But then that potential energy is transferred into kinetic energy as the rubber band gets moving. Maybe another example of this is gasoline. When it's just there in like a gasoline jug, that gasoline is full of potential energy. But if it's lit with a spark, all of a sudden, as it begins to burn and let out heat, the burning and the heat is now kinetic energy. All that potential energy is now put into motion. But maybe my favorite or best word picture to describe this potential and kinetic energy, I was thinking about a roller coaster. So if you get on a roller coaster, as the roller coaster starts, there's a chain that pulls all the cars up to the top. Or something. Whether it's a chain or some other mechanism, there's something that chain pulls the cars all the way up to the top. And when the roller coaster, when the cars are sitting at the top, they sort of hover there for a second. It's part of the ride. Then as the roller coaster starts to crest over the top and begin to head down, all that potential energy that was put in by the chain to get them to the top is now transferred to kinetic energy, and that roller coaster gets moving. And here, there's a picture. I'll have you put it on the screen. You can tell the guy that's at the very top, he's calm because he's not feeling the kinetic energy yet. He's just in a state of potential energy. But the gals who are at the front, you can see their hair's back, their faces are lit up. That's because they're experiencing kinetic energy. They're in motion now. Anyway, as you think about the energy that goes into, creating potential energy, and then as that's released into kinetic energy, there's a verse that I'd like to just reflect on as we start 2022. It's Philippians chapter 2, verses 12 and 13. And there the Apostle Paul, who has just spent time talking about how Christ humbled himself and took on the nature of a servant and, was crucified and died for our sake and for our sin. He says, therefore, my dear friends, as you've always obeyed, not only in my presence, he says, but now much more in my absence, here's what he says, continue to work out your salvation with fear and trembling, for it's God who works in you to will and to act in order to fulfill his good purpose. And here, I think the idea of this verse is that we're supposed to work out what Christ works in. And so maybe as a mental picture or an image, there's a way in which Christ's energy is entering into our life. It's like we're being pulled up to the top. But all that energy, the transformation that Christ is working in us, pulling us upward, so to speak, is not just so that we just sit there and do nothing. That energy that's been worked in, we're supposed to work out. And so here's my way of thinking about it. We often talk about knowing Jesus, making Jesus known, and living a Jesus life. First of all, you've got to know Jesus. And, in this first stage, so to speak, as you get to know Jesus, God's power enters your life. You receive that power. It begins to transform you. It begins to change you from the inside out. You receive freedom and salvation and restoration, and you're made more like Christ, and there's something that God's working in you. But then, a lot of Christians just, oh, okay, awesome. Thanks. I'm so glad I'm changed. No, we're supposed to now work out God's plan and his purpose that he has for us. And, a lot of people, as they enter a new year, they make resolutions or they begin to think, what's God's purpose in my life? And that's where we begin to work out. And so, this is the next step. We know Jesus, we make Jesus known, and we live a Jesus life. And here, I think probably at the heart or center of what this podcast is all about is this unwavering belief that the church has so much more potential that, average, ordinary Christians who right now, in our current operating system, this modern operating system of the church, we just don't have an expectation that, God can use them as disciple makers to reach 30, 60, 100 times, as many as they are. We just don't see that often. It's more centralized, where the church comes and gathers around a pastor or leader who's in ministry, and everyone else is supposed to be looking on or participating in that ministry. But no, that's not the idea. Every person that begins to be changed from the inside out, that's sort of drawn and they feel the work of God, that chain pulling them up, so to speak, if we use our word picture, they're supposed to work out. And this is the idea. We've got to get the church moving. We've got to move from all the potential energy, and now get the church, every member working it out, kinetic energy. So it's not only a call in 2022 to know Jesus, but then it's a call to get people moving in the Great Commission and the gospel, average, ordinary people accomplishing extraordinary things through the power that's been worked in them through the Holy Spirit and the gospel of Jesus Christ. So, Jake, I just, flung rubber bands at you. That's given you plenty of time to think about, as you look at it, what comes to mind? You're a person who I think not only did you sense the power of God entering your life for life change, but you've now felt that call to be active, to be working it out. As you think about this whole idea of the roller coaster, what comes to mind?
Yeah. Well, I think, we've done a lot of service projects here at the church. We've gone out and done things and been able to minister to people. And through that, I think youth groups did a more concrete example for me because I was so active in my life. Being able to like actively pour into kids, whether it was through the youth band, through small groups, or even like when I had the opportunity to teach,
Right.
being able to like take what I've learned, what I've gotten from just these various sources, people like you, people like Aaron and Jason, to push that forward and to use what I've gotten to further my faith in that.
Yeah, and I think that's great. In fact, I see this happening all the time. Once people grab hold of disciple making, they begin to serve their local and their global church in even bigger ways. And it's really this turn from being someone who's just a receiver to becoming a giver. And then to see that giving multiplied by the power of the Holy Spirit in what we're doing. Anyway, I'm excited for the year 2022, the year of the disciple. We're going to work out what God's worked in us, moving from just potential energy to kinetic energy. The church has so much potential as we upgrade the operating system of the church to this ancient operating system, the biblical operating system. That's what we're advocating for. We're excited to see how we're all going to get moving. So anyway, that's the main topic for today. And now we're going to move on to the tipping point. All right, Jake, we're at the second part of our show today called The Tipping Point. And we're in a new year, 2022. Lots of good news to report this week. We have 6 new disciples in our system. So if you're watching this show week by week, you realize, hey, every time we gather together, there's just more people. This is a multiplying movement. 6 new people. Let's welcome them. Chris Dodd, who's being discipled by Adam Skolnick. Bryson Massibo, who's being discipled by Jerry Koning. Joyce Bellis, who's being discipled by Pam Tor. Then we have Harvey Scons and Clayton Vanderlaan and Dave Baum, all of whom are being discipled by Chris Voss. And shout out to Chris, taking on 3 new people as we get into the new year. That's great. And here are a couple of milestones to celebrate. Chris now has reached the 10 milestone, 10 people in his network. That's a big deal. He's given his life away now in such a way that there's 10 people who, through discipleship, becoming disciple makers themselves. Chris has a network of 10 people. Now, we also have a big number to celebrate. Talk about this regularly, that Jesus in the parable of the sower talks about how when the seed falls on good soil, it multiplies 30, 60, and 100 times itself. And God can just use regular people in their everyday lives who, if they become active through the power of the gospel and active in the Great Commission, they begin discipling people. Pretty soon that network grows. And because Jerry took on Bryson, Jerry's a disciple of Bob Crow, Bob hit the 30 milestone, which means that there's now 30 people in his network. And then another big one, Jason Palm, because Adam is now discipling Chris, that's in Jason Palm's network. He now hits the 60 milestone. And in the next segment, we're going to be interviewing Jason Palm, talk a little bit about how, hey, here's this ordinary guy who now has a legacy of 60 people whose lives have been changed through disciples making disciples making disciples. His network is multiplying. God has multiplied the gospel through Jason, which I think is exciting. We're going to talk about that so that you can get a sense of it. And anyway, that brings our total now to 603. So we've crossed 600. I think as we move forward in this year, people, if they keep tuning in, they're just going to see how this number keeps growing and growing and growing, because there's a multiplication movement happening. And anyway, Jake, pretty exciting. Great way to start the year. And everyone, just keep it up. We're proud of what you're doing and glad for it and celebrating it. And looking forward to what God's going to do through our network of disciple makers this year. All right, this is the third segment of our show today called Ordinary People, and joining me today is Jason Palm. And Jason's just an ordinary guy. We'll get to know his story a little bit, but what's remarkable is that, as we just told you, he just hit the 60 milestone, which means there's 60 people that are in his discipleship network. Just, one ordinary guy who's had a profound and large impact through discipleship. And I guess, Jason, here's where I'd like to start. I know when we first met, you had come from Wisconsin. You're now in Florida. You had become dissatisfied in life. You just needed to go in another direction. You threw a dart at the map and started over, which is how you got down here. And maybe you just tell us a little of your story.
Well, first, I just want to be honest. I'm so flattered that I get to be a part of this. Thankful that I get to be on the show and part of 222 Disciple. And I think that's awesome.
Yeah,
so
right.
For me, it all started kind of in college. I grew up in a Christian household, but I didn't really know anything about the Bible. I didn't know anything about who I was. I had made so many decisions that kind of sold out what my identity was to everybody else based on their opinion. And so I was just a fraud and I had to get out. So I threw a dart at a map. I hit Palm Bay, actually, which is north of where we live now. And my last name is Palm, and I didn't want to be Mr. Palm because I was going to be a teacher. I didn't want to be Mr. Palm in Palm Bay. So I looked at the next biggest dot, which was Fort Pierce and Port St. Lucie, and they were the same school district. So I just applied, moved here knowing no one. And so that's how I got down here.
Yeah, and then talk a little bit about, we met, and pretty soon I started discipling you. I'd like to just have you what's really significant in my mind is, in the parable of the sower, it talks about how, when the seed falls on good soil, it multiplies 30, 60, 100 times. And here, you're an ordinary guy. You're going to be a teacher. You threw a dart at the map. You didn't know anyone. But now you have 60 people whose lives have been changed because of your disciple making and the multiplication effect. What stands out to you about that?
Wow. Well, a couple things that stand out easily would be the meaningful relationships and the ease of how I got to 60. But before that, I just wanted to mention it was a really big deal when you asked me to start meeting with you. And so that meant a lot. At that time when I moved here, like I said, I didn't know anybody. I didn't have any meaningful relationships.
Yeah.
I remember I went to the gym. At one point, I was so lonely. I watched an entire TNT movie on a treadmill just so I could be around people. And so the fact that you made time and met with me, it really was a game changer for me.
Yeah,
and I
awesome.
guess going back to the idea of 60, it has to do with first meaningful relationships. I think about people that I have got to be in a discipling relationship with that I maybe never would have in regular life, I guess, if that makes sense, like had that kind of a meaningful, deep relationship with. My best friends in the world are people that I've gone through discipleship with. Do you feel the same way? Like in your life?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I like to talk about this all the time. There is a power in personal relationships that's not going out of style. It's not going to go away. It's the way that God made us. And, so often in life, people they never have the opportunity to develop these sort of deep, meaningful, personal relationships. And when you begin to disciple someone, it's unavoidable. And you think to yourself, oh man, discipling someone, it's going to be a lot of work. No, it all helps you. It's all beneficial to you. You are the winner when you give yourself away. And we talk about how givers gain. That is the truth. If you give yourself away to someone else and you move from being a receiver to a giver, you gain. And I love the fact that you felt the same way.
Oh, it's life-changing. And that kind of goes to the second idea. It just was so easy. I mean, It's not like,
Yeah, and I think when people hear you say that, hey, there's now 60 people in my discipling network, it was so easy, it'll be difficult for people to understand what you mean by that. So say more. How was that so easy? Because there's lots of people, they might be listening in, they can't even imagine having 1 or 2 people in their network, much less multiplying 60 times, and it's been so easy. Why?
well, that's actually what I mean. I mean, I'm one of those people that thinks, how could someone like me have any impact at all? I mean, I don't have very good self-esteem even. And so to like think about that, it's crazy. I would have been one of those people. In fact, first of all, the first person I tried to disciple, it was terrible. It did not go well. I mean, this is the
Right.
behind the curtain here. But then I kept sticking with it, and I met with people, and those people felt the way that I felt when you discipled me, and they wanted to be a part of that, and so they discipled people, and they
Right.
discipled people,
Right.
and that's what I mean. It wasn't. It was more like rolling a snowball down a hill than trying to move a giant boulder of snow. It's just like it's something that I enjoy doing that happened in spite of my insufficiency, which I think what this channel is all about.
Absolutely. And I think this is how the Holy Spirit empowers people. The Holy Spirit empowers ordinary people. And the next thing you know, ordinary people have done extraordinary things. And I'm just so proud and happy of how God's used you. And I'm excited to see how your network's going to keep growing, because I know that you're committed. I mean, you're someone who's all in with both feet. You're going to keep discipling people who will disciple people who will disciple people. It's exciting to see what kind of legacy is being left behind.
Well, the coolest part, I mean, well, the more I've studied the Bible, I told you before I got here, I didn't really, but the more I studied the Bible, the more I learned the same thing, that God doesn't use these extraordinary people, these just huge pillars of awesomeness. He uses screwed up people. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just every time, the more and more I learn about the Bible, I get more reassured. And it's because it's all about God's glory. It's not about us.
Right.
But we are privileged enough to be a part of what he's doing. And that just never runs dull on me. So I will be a part of this my entire life. This is not something that's temporary, that's right now. This is I've just seen the fruits of being a part of something like this, and it is life-changing and life direction altering. And I know I feel in step with what God's doing, and that feels great.
Well, that's awesome. So we're celebrating a milestone, 60 people in your network. Thanks for taking the time with me today. And I know it'll be an encouragement to a lot of people, so really appreciate it. And everybody, that brings to a conclusion this episode of the Disciple Standard Podcast. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Hey, thanks so much for tuning in to the Disciple Standard Podcast. We're so glad you joined us. We encourage you to continue the conversation by joining us on social media. Also, if you want to learn more about the Multiply method or learn about how to take the Multiply pledge, we encourage you to join us on our website at multiply222.com. Have a great day.